Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Hope everybody watching had a terrific Memorial Day weekend. Lindsay, how was yours?
It was good. I just chillaxed with the family, had a nice time. What about you?
Same. I actually didn't do a whole lot. I was just here, didn't go out of town, and yeah, it was pretty chill weekend. I played more video games than I care to admit.
We're gonna have to talk about video games
It was
later.
a little too cold outside for it was nice out, but
We're looking for 80 degrees and plus, right?
That's what we want.
That's what we want. It's
Did
coming
finally
soon.
make it to my rooftop pool for the first time this season last night. So that was
Okay, you
nice.
didn't tell me you had a rooftop pool, so.
Oh yeah?
Well, listen.
You're welcome anytime.
I was about to say, besides the rooftop pool, what's on your radar?
Let's get to it. Well, is the media actually paying too much attention to former President Joe Biden's advanced age and cognitive decline and the failure of mainstream journalism to uncover this story? I mean, the answer to that is obviously no. It's laughable, really. But the subject is front page news right now because the mainstream media's complicity in efforts by Biden's inner circle to suppress the truth from the public for weeks and months and maybe even years. They tried to pull a fast one on the American people and they got caught. Now some journalists are finally reluctantly discussing what was really going on, like Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, authors of the new book Original Sin, which I started reading over the weekend, which unmasked the conspiracy to keep Biden's cognitive decline a secret from the American people. But one commentator at MSNBC thinks what we should really be talking about is the advanced age and the health of President Donald Trump. Oh, seriously, in a recent interview with Thompson, the co-author of Original Sin, Ayman Mohyeldin said that he thinks there's a double standard at play, that there's too much coverage of Biden's health and age compared with Trump. I'm not kidding you. He actually asked Thompson why Thompson wasn't covering that story more aggressively. Watch this.
If you take the lessons learned from the book, both about where the country is on having elder presidents and, more importantly, where the media is there a double standard in which, in a way, the way the media covered Joe Biden's health versus Donald Trump's health during the campaign? And certainly now, is there a double standard with the way we are covering it? I mean, are you out there also investigating and reporting about Trump's health in the same rigor that you did this book?
Thompson responds that he would be happy to look into that subject in the future, but he's a little busy with the Biden book right now. Look, if there was some kind of double standard here, if Trump's age and health and mental state were undercovered by the media, well, yeah, that would be a fair point. But the double standard worked the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the situation. The mainstream media covers Trump's health from a skeptical perspective with great frequency. The media all the time proclaims Trump's statements are characteristic of some kind of mental decline. They comment on his age, they imply he's losing energy and stamina, that his mind doesn't work. They've been saying this for years. Liberal media and Democratic legislators even talked of invoking the 25th Amendment, a provision for removing the president due to health reasons. Representative Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat, introduced a resolution calling on psychiatric professionals to interview Trump and judge his ongoing fitness for office. And she introduced that resolution, all the way back in 2017. That's how long this has been top of mind for Democrats. Here's the key difference between Trump's health and Biden's health. We, the American people, get lots of exposure to Trump, and thus we can judge for ourselves. Biden, on the other hand, was hidden from us. This is quite an important distinction. Trump does interview after interview. He goes on 3-hour-long podcasts. He sits down for interviews with both friendly conservative media and also hostile liberal media. He spontaneously takes questions from the press at events, and so on. Biden, on the other hand, has done fewer press events than any other president in recent memory. He was deliberately kept at arm's length in order to mask his cognitive decline. In the 2020 election, his team used the excuse that the COVID-19 pandemic necessitated a different kind of campaign, and so they largely got away with it. Not so in 2024. Now, it's true that Trump is old, and by the end of his term, he'll be older than Biden is now. The media should continue to cover the implications of that, but I'm sorry. That's not a double standard here. Rather, let me rephrase that. The standard is different because the circumstance is different. Biden was cognitively impaired in an alarming and unprecedented and noticeable way. The American people knew it, Democratic officials hid it, and mainstream media looked the other way. And as I said, I've just started getting into the Tapper-Thompson book. I think it's pretty good, by the way. I recommend people, even if they think they know this whole story, should check it out. A lot of fascinating detail on the Biden family and how his inner circle worked to protect him in a very, not even a cult-like way, it's almost like more of a mob-style way. And also it just becomes clearer and clearer that the COVID pandemic was a gift to the Biden campaign because it allowed them to have an excuse to not do the vigorous public-facing kind of campaign that would have been expected under other circumstances, and that really worked to his favor. But you can't tell me that the media doesn't ask questions about Trump's health. We've heard these from the start, that he's deranged and thus he shouldn't be able to serve as president. That's what the media has said. That I've seen CNN segments about invoking the 25th Amendment against Trump, 8 years ago.
Listen, Biden's team is not lining my pockets. I'm not here to be in defense of Biden. I'm all for younger, sharper minds. I want to tell you that Trump is not that, right? He is the face of instability and knee-jerk reactions. He reacts off emotions often, saying stuff out loud sporadically, reposting AI images that are unreal. That's something that your grandpa would do that doesn't know how to use social media. Might be a little bit, okay, grandpa's losing it, right? So I think the whole world wanted somebody younger and fresh in office. There were a lot of studies and polls that showed that the American public would have preferred two different candidates be running against each other for last year's election. But I do think that it's important to not take your foot off the gas, right? If you correct a problem, then we need to make sure that we correct it for good. And so the problem was that we didn't cover Biden's age enough. I hear that argument and receive it. But Trump will be 83, close to 83 by the end of his term. And he is not the poster child for stability. And I think that has to be recognized because we brush it off as brash or that's just Trump. And I think that some of that is irrational and getting older and not having any couth. And some things that he does are falling in line with people that are getting older that you really can't reel in. And we all have experienced that with elder people that we come across, are friends with, but they're not running our country.
I just don't see much evidence that it's fine, if you don't agree with Trump, to characterize him as unstable or the policies unstable or the rhetoric unstable. That's fine if that's your view. I certainly don't like every single thing Trump does or says. I just don't see that that's having to do with some kind of age-related decline or cognitive decline. I think that is just who he is. So it's similar to what he's said for 8-10 years.
No, there's examples. Like, so he was on News Nation, our sister station. He was on News Nation, and Stephen A. Smith asked him about his attack on Harvard. And he starts responding about how black people support him and Harvard. And it had nothing to do with the answer and the question that Stephen A. Smith asked. And so that is the same thing that when we listen to these Biden tapes, his answers had nothing to do with...
I hate to break it to you, but if you ask politicians tough questions, they pivot to something else.
Oh,
I don't know that that's...
You're making excuses for him.
I'm just saying it's not age. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying I don't think it's related to age or decline. Sure, he doesn't directly answer questions he doesn't want to answer, nor does any other political figure at any time. You ask them questions at those debate stages, they just pivot to attacking someone else or what they want to answer.
In an interview, then you criticize her in a 60 Minutes interview as taking too long and not answering a question. Maybe not cognitive decline, but you just say she's not a good...
I don't think Kamala Harris is, to be clear, experiencing any kind of cognitive decline.
But if Trump dodges the question and doesn't even take a breath but just answers the wrong question, that's not a little bit... something that's questionable to be looked at.
Look, he is old, and you're right that people in both parties worried that about these candidates and wanted different candidates. You are right about that. There were poll findings that America wanted two different candidates. But the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Republicans held competitive primaries. There were other candidates. There was Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, Chris Christie, others. And the Republican voters said, no, Trump, please. And so we ran that experiment. On the Democratic side, you didn't do that. Biden said, no, I'm running, and if anyone else tries to run, we'll have them killed. He didn't literally say that, but that was the attitude of his surrogates on cable news. And so there was no system, and so was him, and then this happened.
Well, Republicans got what they wanted. They got Trump in office, so we'll just watch that cognitive.
And then soon we'll have this is Trump's last election, despite the whole third-term stuff, and then
we'll see what happens.
We will have a new apprentice, one far younger and more powerful.
Hopefully, unless it's Bernie Sanders.
Well, good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. What else would we have? Again, joined by Lindsey Granger. Nice to see you.
Happy to be here. You look refreshed for a rainy day.
Do I?
Yeah.
I feel so refreshed. Actually, I was just thinking... sometimes you can't remember what you had for breakfast even an hour later.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I wrote for my radar today, so I'll be finding out for the first time just alongside you.
And so will the audience. So what's on your radar?
Let's find out, shall we? The Democratic Shadow Cabinet. There it is. The Democratic Shadow Cabinet rises. I'm not sure this next one ranks in the pantheon of all-time bad ideas. It's much too trivial for that, but it was a big topic on social media yesterday, so let's get right to it. One mainstream media outlet, Politico, has a columnist who has proposed the Democrats convene a shadow cabinet to oppose Trump and his very real, non-shadowy cabinet. This shadow cabinet would have no real power, of course, so it's mostly just rhetorical opposition. Quote, it's a common feature of opposition politics abroad and could be a way for Democrats to flood the media zone and deliver a coordinated response to Trump's most wild maneuvers, writes Politico's Bill Scher, a liberal political writer. He notes that Democratic members of Congress serving as ranking members on various committees are in effect serving in such a role, but he thinks Democrats need public-facing cheerleaders and bomb throwers. Ranking members have their uses, they're good at reclaiming their time and making motions to recommit, but they are not the fresh faces who can give the Democratic Party a sleek, new look, he writes. So, who are these fresh, sleek faces the Democrats should center as their opposition leaders? Well, Politico did put forward a bunch of names that range from familiar and tired to unknown and pointless to weird stunt casting. If this is really the best you got, Team Blue is doomed. So here we go. Samantha Power for Secretary of State, General Charles Brown for Secretary of Defense, John Tester for Secretary of the Interior, Letitia James for Attorney General, Lena Khan for Secretary of the Treasury, John Boyd for Secretary of Agriculture, Governor Josh Green for HHS, and let's actually take a break there for a minute, because who are these people? Now, some of those names probably are familiar to you. I knew most of them. I didn't know all of them. Some are well-known, like Samantha Power and Letitia James, and are incredibly controversial. Are they the fresh new faces of the Democratic Party? Really? Actually, the wish list did have precisely two names that make sense for these jobs, if the job is to call attention to what a Democratic cabinet would do instead of a Trump cabinet. The two arguably smart choices are Jon Stewart for Veterans Affairs and Mark Cuban for Secretary of Commerce. Stewart and Cuban, unlike most of the other people on the list, are actual professional entertainers who are good at talking to people and blasting out a message on social media, on TV and podcasts, etc. They can get a message out, and they have built-in audiences who are not already converted to the Democratic cause, so that does make a certain amount of sense. I mean, just look at what Trump's done. His cabinet is disproportionately staffed by media figures and stars from conservative television. Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, Sean Duffy, and others. Trump understands, I guess better than Democrats do, it's not enough to have the right ideas. You have to know how to sell them to voters and to viewers. Looks like the Democrats are, I think, still figuring that out. As Sean Spicer said in reference to this wish list, if this is the best Democrats can do, we are in good shape. But we have to talk about, by far, the strangest name on the list. Giselle Fetterman, wife of U.S. Senator John Fetterman, who Politico is recommending for Homeland Security, despite her having no relevant experience whatsoever, as far as I can tell. Write to me if I'm somehow wrong about that. Politico writes, Senator John Fetterman has become a highly controversial figure in the Democratic Party. His militaristic commentary in defense of Israel has alienated progressives. Leaks from former staffers have raised concerns about whether he's fit to serve in the wake of an extended hospital stay to relieve acute depression. But his wife, Giselle Fetterman, has none of the baggage and is a compelling figure in her own right. End quote. Imagine thinking that Giselle Fetterman is a better political operator than John Fetterman. Look, I know leftist Democrats don't like to hear this, but Fetterman has become more popular in his home state of Pennsylvania by adopting all those moderate stances that so infuriate progressives. Not less popular, more popular. This makes me think that if Democrats actually did have a charismatic, well-liked national figure who can speak to large, moderate audiences, perhaps even winning back alienated identity groups, a la the liberal Joe Rogan we keep talking so much about, they would probably ignore that person. In fact, someone in the mainstream media would probably have the bright idea, I guess, to give that job to the person's much more liberal wife. Good luck, guys. So did you see this list yesterday?
I did. I loved it. Brilliant. I thought that it was funny. You said this is a shadow cabinet, but Trump's cabinet is actually very shadowy with figures that have no relevant experience, just like Fetterman's wife. He filed it and listed it with people that just haven't done any jobs like this besides talk on TV, so they can schmooze and talk a good game. I think this is a great strategy. I talk about first steps and not kind of just relying on the criticizing Trump of it all to be your solution. And this is actually a solution that puts people in places, like you said, Mark Cuban, like Letitia James, that have actually gone up against Trump and will provide a response, like you mentioned in the article, daily, that actually combats and gives Democrats something to lean on as opposed to people just being silent. People are confused. Where are you? How are you fighting back against Trump? Are you just going to lay down and say, okay, whatever he wants to do? Like, people have been confused about where everyone who was complaining the entire election season has been. And so this is one strategy. I don't agree with all the names, obviously, but I think it's a step in the right a direction of also putting people, like you said, you don't know their names. So maybe we're actually putting qualified people that have interesting backgrounds and experiences as opposed to celebrities in positions of power. And that might be actually a good thing, a great thing towards progressing the country. And accountability happens through visibility. So when we're seeing these people and they're holding Trump accountable, and we have all these different people out here that can call it to attention a variety of different issues, I think that makes us all better. This is one plan, and I'm happy to see a plan from somebody that's not even particularly in the Democratic Party, an opinion writer, showing the way for what a solution may look like or start to look like.
Put Giselle Fetterman in charge.
No, I don't agree with
security.
I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with everything.
Do you see how that speaks to my point? Like, what liberal brain thinking that Giselle Fetterman would be a better... Look, I know people on the left don't like him, but he's a popular senator in a swing state. He might actually be too physically incapacitated to serve. I'm not even arguing that. But to think you would swap one for the other, it's just like more liberal, more woke, more of that kind of thing. That's how many times does that have to be rejected by the people before Democratic operatives, or as you say in this case, yes, it's just a liberal journalist, before they realize that's not the solution?
I would have added other people to the list. I definitely would not have skipped over Stacey Abrams, who's been extremely effective in campaigning.
Abrams.
Yes, I definitely would have added her to the list.
Isn't she? I thought election denial was disqualifying offense.
No, I think that Stacey Abrams has done a lot to galvanize the grassroots vote. We've seen what she's done in past elections, even though she didn't win her own elections.
We'll try to tell her that.
Well, we know.
She doesn't react well to being told that.
We know that she has the staying power of somebody that belongs in the Democratic Party. You don't make parties up of people who haven't been there before and don't understand the lay of the land. We would have 10 Elon Musks in office, which we saw was an absolute disaster.
I wish we had 100. I wish we had 100 Elon Musks in office.
That's ridiculous. He did nothing but create a lot of chaos for many people and didn't really put a major dent in how much we're spending.
Well, I think that is unfortunate. Actually,
it's very unfortunate.
Elon Musk agrees with that, has been tweeting a little passive-aggressively lately, doing a lot of replies saying, yeah, I tried to reduce spending and it's impossible and they stopped me and the Republicans won't vote to actually do it and it's very disheartening. And I feel that, man.
Yeah, as coming in here as probably the most powerful outsider and leaving with your tail tucked between your legs is not something that...
I don't know if he's leaving with his tail tucked.
I think so. He's just in higher level conversations now.
If the richest and smartest person in the world can't even stop, stops like a sliver of reckless government spending, it's not a lot.
Well, I don't think it's reckless.
Despair given to our despair.
USAID and people across
reckless.
The world. I don't think it's reckless.
Yeah,
but when somebody has no comprehension about how government works and just thinks they can run the government like a business, which it is not a private business, that's where you come into issues like we did with Elon Musk and Doge. But we'll still reap the benefits of his bad decisions for years to come.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Happy Thursday, and I'm in a reasonably pleasant mood for a change. How about you?
Really? Look at how big the smile is. This is great. Okay, well, if you're in a good mood, I'm in a good mood. Maybe you're going to be in a good mood towards Biden, because I know he's on your radar again. So tell the people what is fully on your radar.
Yeah, that's a big negative there. Negatory. Who is most responsible for the Biden White House's desperate and undemocratic efforts to shield President Joe Biden's cognitive decline from the people? Well, two very different sources have reached the same conclusion. Former First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is perhaps the chief villain of the story. That is according to Original Sin, the new book by mainstream journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, and also according to David Hogg, who was recently recorded by conservative undercover journalist network Project Veritas. Let's start with Hogg. The following video footage comes from Project Veritas, right-wing media group founded by James O'Keefe, though he was eventually ousted from it. Project Veritas specializes in obtaining surreptitious recordings of staffers who work in Democratic political organizing and liberal media and publicizes the things they reveal about their employers. Project Veritas obtained video of David Hogg, vice chair of the DNC, and also another Dem staffer, putting the responsibility for the cover-up on Biden's inner circle, particularly Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal. Let's watch this.
The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress you enough.
Like Jill Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Jill Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at the level. Like I would avoid him. Like he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony Bernal.
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's like a shadowy, like Wizard of Oz type figure.
So some thoughts. First off, look, it's not always necessary to record people without their knowledge in order to get the inside scoop. Hogg has actually been castigating the Democratic Party lately, as well as its failed electoral strategy, which has caused Gen Z, particularly Gen Z males, to move to the right. The DNC is actually trying to remove him from power in order to appease an irate Native American activist woman who thinks that his vice chair election was rigged against her, which is kind of crazy. I think he might have just honestly assessed what he sees as the problems with the Biden White House if he was asked about it in a straightforward fashion. But I digress. Now that's because it's not really a secret anymore. In fact, the original Sin book, which I'm now most of the way through, chiefly identifies these same figures, Jill Biden and her chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, as the main bad actors in this sordid tale. According to Tapper and Thompson, Dr. Jill was initially opposed to her husband running for president, but after she got on board, she really got on board, and she took dramatic steps to protect him at all costs. Indeed, important decisions related to both governance and campaigning were made by an incredibly small group of top aides nicknamed the Politburo. These aides were incredibly loyal to the Biden family and humored the family's need for privacy and also secrecy. Bernal, the Jill Biden chief of staff, had tremendous power over personnel. Basically, you didn't go along with the approach, you were out of there. So when it came time to make the decision about whether Biden should run for re-election, well, that decision was made without any input whatsoever from pollsters or campaign consultants or Biden's cabinet, let alone the voters. It was made by the Biden family, who were in wild support of Joe seeking another term. You weren't allowed to question it. Frankly, it scarcely occurred to anyone that they should question it because you don't question Joe and you don't question Jill. This book, which I really recommend to people, it is fascinating to see just how shielded Biden was. I think I imagined a large number of people in on this conspiracy to keep Biden out of the public's eye. But it's actually just 3 or 4 people. Donlin, Ricchetti, Anita Dunn, and then Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. Keeping Biden away from the cabinet themselves. Cabinet secretaries, top Democratic officials couldn't get meetings with Biden. They did everything they could to limit his, not just his public appearances, but how many appearances he was doing with other leaders in the Democratic Party. And that decision came from Joe Biden himself and Jill Biden and these top people. And then the decision to run for re-election, they never sat in a room and decided, okay, here are the strengths and weaknesses of you having an additional campaign at this advanced age, with your age and inflation being top concerns of voters. They never had that meeting. Joe Biden and Jill Biden decided, well, of course he's running for re-election. That was told to these 3 or 4 people, and Ron Klain included. And then that was that. There was no polling even done. It's really astonishing how insular this family, how much it's about protecting the Biden family. All these top aides viewed their role as that they were responsive, obviously not to the American people, but not to the Democratic Party, but to the Biden family. It's a family affair. It's really interesting. I did not know the extent to which the Biden family had made protecting them. And then that explains all of the Hunter-related decisions, really. Why didn't they distance themselves from Hunter? Why didn't they ever throw him to the wolves? Why did they all show up to his trial? They didn't put any distance between them and Hunter as all of his legal episodes were unfolding. Well, from reading this book, I understand that never would have even occurred to them to do that because he's part of the family, and they protect the family. They were mad at other members of the family who were talking to the public. You don't betray the family. You don't talk to the public. You don't separate yourself from the family. And the most prominent member of the family being Jill Biden.
I love today's radar. I think this is brilliant. Let me tell you why. Conservative media should understand this was not some huge Democratic cover-up. This is what I've been saying. This was a chief villain that we're calling Jill Biden, but she's also a protective wife. Mm-hmm. So if you think about what she was doing, she's just protecting her husband, somebody who wasn't on board with the idea of it in the beginning, came fully on board, and then did not want him to get the criticism of not being able to lead because she's seen him in his lowest times be resilient. And she truly believed that he can do it again and wanted to shield him from any criticism because she thought that was a better option than President Trump. So that was a huge miscalculation by a loved one, not a huge Democratic cover-up. And I love that. I can accept that. We can look inwards and see what the problem was and just say, okay, all these people that were criticizing and bothering about this every day, Elizabeth Warren, others, they're not involved with this. They were shut out and iced out of the entire conversation, which I think should redirect a lot of the criticism of mainstream media and all these other, people that are on the chopping block for this, something that they had nothing to do with. They also were trying to figure out what was actually going on. Obviously, where there's smoke, there's fire. So something was going on, but because no one had access besides family members, you remember after that terrible debate performance, you know who Joe Biden went to Camp David with? His family members.
Right.
That's it. And NBC reported that they did a meeting about what the next step should be, and people were critical of, like, why would your family be the only ones involved in that meeting? And he said it wasn't for that. This is unequivocally false. But then we know he made the decision to drop out soon after that. I think that's what we have, is that family protecting family and not worried about maybe what's best for the country. So it was a gross miscalculation on their part, but not some huge cover-up. And I'm happy with that solution and to keep looking into it.
Huge in terms of consequential, maybe huge, not huge in terms of how many people were straightforwardly involved. Yes, you're right. Still think Democrats and Democratic leaders and the cabinet officials can be criticized for not going public for when they were repeatedly told you can't see Biden.
In the middle of an election season, you want them to criticize the person who was still on the ballot and risk losing. No one does that in politics. That's not an option. But a lot of people don't like Trump, but they're not going to criticize him once he's the option.
Sure, you could say it would have been bad politics. Maybe that's right. But also, and that's the other thing the book reveals, is that the concerns go back so much further than any of us thought. That basically, he aged 30 years when Beau Biden died, and he aged another 30 years when Hunter's plea deal fell apart, and there were warning signs, and yes, it's not like everyone in the Democratic Party knew how bad it was and helped keep that quiet. It was being kept quiet from them too. I wish they would have. I think they probably admit now they should have spoke up earlier, because of the disastrous end this came to right before the finish line.
Well, the reports were that Nancy Pelosi was actively involved in saying you have to step aside. Yeah,
yes.
But if she is one of the top Democrats that have been there for years, then you understand for her it was that hard and it became public that she had a rift with Biden. You know how far people were trying to go to get in touch with him. Because what you want to do is start with the source inside of the party and not bring it to the news media outlets. Like, that would be a disaster in what was already a disastrous campaign for a second term.